grab your attention for the next talk. As you can see, it's entitled Doing a New Thing, and you can see the names of the people that are supposedly talking. Well, it's slightly changed. But we have with us, we do indeed have Rosy Fairhurst, who is very involved in this diocese in thinking about new monastic stuff. And of course, we're very mindful of what the Archbishop of Canterbury has set as a priority, and indeed what is going on down at Lambeth. So there's the context. We've also got Kevin and Ellen, and they are from Monos. They come with a community angle particularly. And we also have one of the directors of Monos with us as well. So to give us different perspectives from both, the different angles of where Monos is coming from. So I'll hand over to Rosy, who I believe is going to do kind of question and answer with our guests. So welcome and thank you for being with us.
It's great to be here. I think the original plan was to have Ian Mobsby here, but he couldn't be here, so I'm your substitute. I just say a little bit about where I'm coming from with an overview of what I've discerned of the new monastic movement, but then we're really going to earth and root that in the lived experience over the last 35 years of Ellen and Kevin, and along part of that journey, Steve with Monos Community, which is one of Leicestershire's authentic expressions of new monastic community. So, where am I coming from on defining new monastic community? A rule of life, a rhythm of prayer, a discernment of charism. I came with a long-standing interest in Christian communities of different kinds and of the monastic. And from a current context here, as one of the canons of this cathedral, and trying to understand what community and potentially new monastic community might look like in this setting. But via various routes, I came here from what in Partnership for Missional Church, which we do in this diocese, might be called an excellent failure, from my point of view, of trying to set up a new monastic community in Bromley by Bow, in the East End of London, just near where the new Olympic Park is. So that was in the context of a highly innovative social outreach, which had a health centre, lots of arts, social enterprise incubator, therapeutic work, in the middle of one of the lost places of empire, you could say, a very grey, bereft part of the East End, which had been bombed to pieces in the war, but now suddenly was becoming gentrified and the house prices were rocketing up. And this centre had started from a little URC church. And the vision came from seeing how this centre reminded me of a monastery. A friend walked round with me and said, "Do you know about George Ling's 7 sacred spaces?" which I'm sure many of you here will be familiar with. And that gave me one set of tools to think about it with. For those of you who don't know, there's a wonderful little booklet that Church Army have done on that, about cell, chapel, cloister, chapter, refectory, scriptorium and garden as the foundational spaces. And if you go on Llandaff Diocese's website, you will find a lot of material about applying that in parish and other contexts. We had a day about it here with George Ling's in Leicester in January of this year. Anyway, as I carried on, I came across the various expressions of community across London, often on hard housing estates, met Ian and came across Moot, discovered the 12 marks of new monasticism, which again, I don't know how many of you are familiar with, but are a really interesting reference point for a sort of radical edge to new monastic communities. Relocation to the abandoned places of empire, sharing economic resources with fellow community members and the needy among us, hospitality to the stranger, lament for racial divisions, and active pursuit of just reconciliation, humble submission to Christ's body, the church, intentional formation in the way of Christ and the rule of community, nurturing common life among members of an intentional community, support for singles alongside monogamous married couples and their children, geographical proximity to community members, care for the plot of God's earth, peacemaking, commitment to a disciplined contemplative life. Now imagine you, like me, might be thinking, well, I can think of some who show some of those, but very few that show all of those charisms and all of those fruits, but it's a high bar to set. And those 12 marks of new monasticism came out of an American conversation about amongst the new monastic communities that were growing up there. Now, as these three have reminded me this morning, that there have been roots in the 20th century from England and from Europe as well as from the States. But what I did was go on a travel fellowship to explore new monasticism in relation to old monasticism in the States, because I was intrigued to understand how that statement had been founded and what was its genesis. Of course, the phrase comes from Dietrich Bonhoeffer when he talks about the restoration of the church will surely come only from a new type of monasticism, which has nothing in common with the old, his words, but a complete lack of compromise in a life lived in accordance with the Sermon on the Mount in the discipleship of Christ. He practiced that in seeking to educate people training for ordained ministry in the confessing church in that period of the rise of Nazism, and many of you will know what he suffered in standing up to fascism. And it seems quite a prophetic, and even more prophetic and apt connection when we think about the rise of fascism, which is going on today in Europe and in the States. So Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove and Shane Claiborne are the best known communicators of the new monastic movement in the States, but there are many others, as I discovered. Jim Wallace's Sojourners community are also very involved in that. By the way, I should say, I have done some booklets. There are lots of you here. Anybody who wants one, I can email one to you after with some references on. So don't worry too much about catching all the detail. So when I began my journey in San Francisco, I noticed that the different new monastic communities had different, they often had mission, community, and formation at their heart, but in different proportions. So, for example, Mark Scandrette and Reimagine really emphasized the formation, the teaching side of it, but actually their experiment in setting up a bigger community had failed. And so they still had a community, they lived community in their home, but they discovered that they were mainly on the teaching side of things, rather than say, for example, David Jansen from the Reba Place community of the Mennonites in Chicago, who went round mentoring all these community builders from the experience of an older community founded 50 years ago that had been through the mill a few times, that had dealt with some of the issues around housing, around intergenerational questions, which of course come up if you go on long enough. How do you care for the elderly in your community, and how do you live together in those ways? But anyway, back to San Francisco. So different emphases in different communities. I went from there to the Mennonites, and that was very important for me, because I also realized the link with old monasticism, that when the Benedictines, when the Reformation happened, Peter Statler, who was a Benedictine monk, became one of the Anabaptists and one of the founders, along with Menno Simons, of the Mennonites, and they went over under persecution to the States and carried on a core element of monastic living, sharing the common purse and living in community, although in married and family life as well. And so Reba Place Fellowship had started in the 70s, and with that commitment to a common purse, I was never very impressed with their Bible study, but then I suddenly thought, who am I to criticize their Bible study? When have I ever shared a common purse with anybody or got remotely near it? And the things they'd been able to do through doing that. They'd founded churches, they'd founded other communities, they'd founded a massive housing work that gave good quality, affordable housing to people who wouldn't otherwise have had it. They'd set up numerous social enterprises to develop the work and to have all sorts of other benefits. So that was really important for me, to see that and to see their role in nurturing these younger communities that were springing up and helping them understand the key questions about formation and community living. I went to New York. I went to Wild Goose, which is the equivalent of Greenbelt over there. And in New York, met someone who'd been with Shane Claiborne, heard a lot about the difficulties which they'd had as a kind of wild, anarchic, and they were anarchists basically, community, really committed to social activism, and the ups and downs of that life. I went to North Carolina, where I was very impressed, meeting Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove and seeing at first hand his commitment to social justice, his passionate commitment to the Black civil rights movement, his own personal conversion as a white Christian from North Carolina, one of the most racist states. I think I say that there's a big race issue there, and of course they're in the South, and how going to a black-led church and continuing to be involved in that question had been important. I discovered the importance of theology, the role of Stanley Hauerwas from Duke University, with his theology that shows the importance of practices, of habits, of holy habits, and how they show the evidence of us of being church and how we live our theology. I met there the importance of the Catholic worker movement, which was founded by Dorothy Day, and with its emphasis both on urban communities working amongst the poor and rural communities. And I saw new expressions. For example, in Virginia, there was a farming community that had Eritrean asylum-seeking farmers working alongside the indigenous folk. So there were some brilliant things. After my excellent failure at Bromley by Bow, I landed here at Leicester and came still with a vision for taking forward something about new monastic community, and discovered that met with something that was rising up here already. I've only been here 2 years, and I've been trying to discover how that works, how that might look like in a cathedral amidst a rather extraordinary context of burying a king and other assorted things, which have given us a few things to think about. But actually, as I mentioned, and maybe I'll just say finally that we have a new bishop who's arrived, who's been very inspired by St Anselm's community at Lambeth Palace, and so the vision for a new monastic community here is rapidly moving forward with other people from the diocese, but we are very much in process with that. But I'd like to turn to the one really good example of a long-standing new monastic community in Leicestershire, which was founded by these two here, and who some of you will know their son, Anthony Brimley, who's probably the name most associated with Monos in the public mind. They are currently very close to Mount St Bernard's Abbey, which is a traditional monastic, is it Cistercian community, so very contemplative. Now, their story, we could have a whole day on it just by itself. How many minutes have we got left?
25 past, it's still 30 minutes.
No, it's 25 to. Yes. 10 minutes, good. I've stayed to my timetable, excellent. So, I think what I want to do is say that there are several parts to your story, aren't there? Coming out, I'm going to summarise some of the beginning bits because I don't think we'll get through all of them. But coming out of the Catholic Church, influenced by the charismatic movement, the rise of drama and dance, the missions that were going on, and also a very important encounter with John Skinner, who became the founder of the Northumbria community. Perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about that encounter with John Skinner and his community and how that led you into the formation of your own community. Yeah? Ellen? Are you switched on?
I think so. Can you hear me? Okay.
You need
Not
to
used
speak
to
up.
this. Okay, so the way that...
Speak up and have it right close. That's it.
Right, is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, we had a mission to our own church, and with it came dance and drama, which was something that we'd never, ever seen before, but got very, very involved within that. And the person who actually bought that dance came from Northumberland, from Holy Island, and was very involved with the Reverend John Skinner at the time. So the more and more that we became involved with the dance and the drama, he took us to meet John Skinner up the A1, God knows how many, 300 and odd miles for this visit, in a very isolated place. And there was the Reverend John Skinner with his family, living a life that we'd never even encountered before, but became very, very, very drawn to a way of life that we were learning about.
So to cut to the chase, you ended up going at his invitation for a year, living alongside the community to understand how community living worked and how you might be able to form your own community?
That's right, yes. We'd had a dream about a house for people to come to be able to take time out and find who they were in God. And so, as I understand it, so having started in the 80s on this journey, out of that, the first step was to go back to a smaller house. That's right. So we did a year learning and listening and failing and starting again. And we came back home to the Midlands, where we really were then just waiting on God.
And in the end, in fact, from what you said to me, you'd given up on the big house ever happening.
We'd given up, yeah. That by the time we were 60 years old, our son had come alongside us and wanted to live this life too, and was making lots of inroads. I mean, he'd gone and done MAs in different types of Celtic Christianity, and he'd made a relationship with the abbot at the monastery, and on his way home one day from the monastery he saw a house up for rent, and he inquired about it, and it actually belonged to the monastery. And he came home, I'll never forget it. Mum and Dad have found the house. I found your dream. And we just said, no, son, no, we're too old now. This is your time, and we'll support you in Monos. We're quite happy living the life that we have learnt for the last 30 years. We're happy. We can do this. We want to support you to get this life out there for the people, to help them. No, Mum, no, you need to come. So they dragged us, him and his wife, to this house just down the road from the monastery, and to our dismay, it was perfect. So we just it just felt like we all held hands. There was 9 of us, and we made this jump. We got rid of the house that we were in, and we made this jump and landed right next to a real life monastery, the actual life that we'd been drawing on for all these years to sustain us for wherever we were.
And this, as I understand it now, you have a cafe, because you always had a ministry of hospitality, wherever you could get a gas ring to hold a pot of soup.
Yeah.
And you have the Educational Foundation,
Yes.
which in the Q&A you can hear more of, and that Steve works with, and the actual house for living in as well.
That's right, yeah. And there's now 14 now, because our youngest son, who went out and made his own life and career, said, I really want to help you. And in the end, he just gave his job up and moved over, and the whole family are now here, helping to run our centre.
And I was very moved to hear that the community name before Monos started in its current incarnation by the monastery was the community of Mary and John and Mary.
Yeah.
And that moment when Jesus gives Mary to his best friend to look after and says, your son, your mother, the relationship between nuclear family and Christian family. You can ask them or me more questions over at the other side now, but I believe Alison's going to tell you how to get there.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure there are many questions, and if you would like to wander over to the St Martin's house, we are in the Wycliffe room over there where you can place your questions. But may we first have a thanks to our guests. Thank you very much indeed. So if you'd like to go through the west door, if you want to join us for questions, into St Martin's house, turn left along the main corridor and you'll see the Wycliffe room there. Thank you very much.